They wondered why humans sent just one that looked like a vessel, until they saw it. The massive ship, Eternal Vigilance, floated in the darkness of space like a metal city. Inside its halls, representatives from 12 different alien species gathered around a huge circular table. The air was thick with tension and fear. Holographic displays showed images that made even the bravest warriors feel cold inside. Admiral Kethvar stood at the center of the room. His reptilian scales were dark green, and his yellow eyes reflected the light from the displays. He was old, even by Saurian standards, and had fought in more wars than most species had seen in their entire history. But nothing had prepared him for this. "The Devourers are coming," he said, his voice echoing in the chamber. "Our scouts estimate they will reach the outer colonies in 6 standard weeks." The holographic displays shifted, showing massive mechanical creatures the size of planets. They moved through space like hungry beasts, consuming everything in their path. Stars went dark. Planets disappeared. Entire solar systems became empty voids. "How many ships do we have?" asked Zarathul, the representative of the crystalline hegemony. Her body was made of living crystal that caught and reflected light in beautiful patterns. But today, even her natural glow seemed dimmed by worry. 50,000 ships from all 12 species combined, Kethvar replied. "Our best estimates suggest this will buy us 3 weeks at most." A heavy silence filled the room. The Insectoid Collective's delegate, Zorthok, clicked his mandibles nervously. His compound eyes reflected the images of destruction over and over again. 3 weeks is not enough time to evacuate even one major colony world. The Elven representative, Lord Silvermoon, leaned forward. His pointed ears twitched slightly, a sign of deep concern among his people. "What about the Ascended Minds? Surely their reality-bending technology can help us." The Ascended Minds representative was a floating sphere of pure energy. When it spoke, its voice came from everywhere and nowhere at once. "We have run all possible calculations. The probability of victory is 0.003%. Even with our most advanced weapons, the Devourers adapt too quickly." More silence. Everyone knew what 0.003% meant. It meant they were all going to die. "Wait," said a new voice from the back of the room. "Earth will contribute to the defense." Everyone turned to look at Ambassador Chen, the human representative. He was a small man compared to most of the aliens in the room, wearing a simple blue uniform. The humans were the newest members of the Galactic Defense Council, having joined only 5 years ago. Most species still thought of them as primitive creatures who had barely learned to leave their home planet. Zarathul's crystal body chimed with what sounded like laughter. "Humans? You have what? Maybe 50 ships? And they're hardly more advanced than chemical rockets." Chen nodded calmly. "Actually, we're sending 1 ship." The room erupted in noise. Representatives from different species began talking all at once. Some laughed. Others made sounds of disbelief. Zorthak's clicking became so loud it sounded like a machine gun. "1 ship?" Kethvar asked, his voice rising. "You're facing the end of all life in the galaxy, and you're sending 1 ship?" "That's correct," Chen replied. He touched a control pad, and a new holographic display appeared. It showed a ship that looked nothing like the sleek warships of the other species. It was blocky and ugly like a flying cargo container. "The UESS probability 0. Lord Silvermoon studied the display with his sharp elven eyes. "This looks like a transport ship. Where are its weapons?" "It has some basic defensive systems," Chen said. "Basic defensive systems?" The Ascended Mind's energy field flickered with what might have been confusion. "This vessel appears to be primarily cargo space. The crew complement is listed as 12 individuals. 12 humans cannot operate a ship of this size effectively." Zarathul's crystal body rang like bells as she laughed harder. "Are you mocking us? Do you think this is some kind of joke? The Devourers have destroyed civilizations that were old when your species was still living in caves." Chen's expression didn't change. "The probability 0 will take point position." "Point position?" Kethvar's scales darkened with shock. "You mean the front of the defense line? The position closest to the enemy?" "That's correct." Zorthak stopped clicking and leaned forward on his 6 legs. "Human Chen, perhaps you don't understand. Point position means your ship will be the first target. The Devourers will destroy it in seconds. We understand the risks, Chen replied. Precognitive seers of Andromeda had been quiet during the meeting. Their representative was a tall, thin being with large black eyes that could see possible futures. She suddenly stood up, her whole body trembling. I tried to see what happens to the human ship, she whispered. But I can't. When I look at its future, I see nothing. Not destruction. Nothing. Like it exists outside of time itself. This statement made everyone uncomfortable. The seers were never wrong about the future. If they couldn't see something, it usually meant something very strange was going to happen. Chen nodded politely. Thank you for trying. This is madness, Lord Silvermoon said. Even if your ship had the most advanced weapons in the galaxy, one vessel cannot stop millions of Devourers. What exactly do you think 12 humans can accomplish? We're going to do what humans do best, Chen answered. Which is what? Kethvar demanded. We're going to prove that the impossible is just another word for something that hasn't happened yet. The room fell silent again. Nobody knew what that meant. The crystalline hegemony had weapons that could shatter moons. The Saurians had armor that could withstand the heat of stars. The elves had plasma technology beyond anything humans could imagine. The insectoids had swarm tactics perfected over millions of years. Even the youngest species in the council had technology far beyond what Earth could produce. Ambassador Chen, Kethvar said slowly, I respect your species' courage, but courage alone won't stop the Devourers. They've consumed 1,000 civilizations, many far more advanced than humanity. Maybe, Chen said, but none of those civilizations were human. What makes humans so special? Zarathul asked, her laughter finally. Stopping, Chen smiled for the first time during the meeting. We don't know when to quit. The meeting continued for several more hours as they planned the defense of the Kepler 442 system. The combined fleet would form defensive lines around the system's outer planets. The most powerful ships would form the main battle line, while smaller vessels would provide support and try to rescue survivors. And at the very front, closer to the approaching horror than any sane being would volunteer to go, would be one ugly human cargo ship with 12 crew members and a name that made no sense to anyone. As the representatives left the Eternal Vigilance to return to their fleets, many of them wondered if the humans had simply accepted that they were going to die and decided to die first. Others thought maybe the young species had misunderstood how dangerous the situation was. Only the precognitive seer remained troubled. She had tried again and again to see the fate of the probability zero, but every time she looked into the future, she saw the same thing. Nothing. Not darkness, not destruction, not death. Just nothing. As if the ship and its crew existed in a place where the normal rules of time and space didn't apply. She didn't tell the others about the other thing. She had seen. In the brief moments when her visions touched the human ship, she had felt something that made her mind hurt. It was like looking at mathematics that didn't make sense, or trying to understand a color that didn't exist. Whatever the humans were planning, it was beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen before. They wondered why humans sent just one that looked like a vessel. Until they saw it. 3 weeks later, the combined galactic fleet took positions around the Kepler 442 system. 50,000 ships formed defensive lines around the outer planets. The sight was magnificent and terrifying at the same time. Crystalline warships sparkled like jewels in space. Saurian battlecruisers looked like flying mountains covered in weapons. Elven vessels moved with grace that made them seem alive. And there, at the very front of the formation, sat the probability zero. It looked even worse in person than it had in the holographic display. The ship was basically a giant metal box with engines stuck on the back. Its hull was dull gray, marked with scratches and scorch marks from what looked like normal space travel. Next to the beautiful warships of the other species, it looked like someone had accidentally parked a garbage truck in a museum. Captain Veltar of the crystalline flagship Harmony of Ages studied the human vessel through her ship's sensors. She had fought in dozens of battles and commanded fleets that had conquered entire star systems. But she had never seen anything like this. "What are we looking at exactly?" asked her science officer, a young crystalline named Koleth, whose body glowed, bright blue with curiosity. "I'm not sure," Veltar admitted. "Run a full sensor sweep. I want to know everything about that ship." The results were confusing. The probability 0 appeared to be built around one massive chamber that took up most of the ship's interior. The chamber was roughly spherical and filled with equipment that didn't match anything in their databases. "These readings don't make sense," Koleth said, his glow shifting to orange with frustration. "The chamber is lined with what the humans call quantum probability manipulators and causality anchors. But those aren't real things. They're just words." "What about weapons?" Veltar asked. "Basic defensive lasers. Nothing more powerful than what you'd find on a cargo escort." "The armor is standard metal alloy, maybe 50 years behind our current technology. Life support systems are minimal. Power generation is barely enough to run the ship's basic functions." Veltar stared at the sensor readings. Nothing about the human ship made military sense. It was like someone had taken a cargo hauler, filled it with nonsense equipment, and decided to fight the most dangerous enemy in the galaxy. Similar conversations were happening throughout the fleet. On the Saurian dreadnought scales of victory, Admiral HFY was receiving reports from his best tactical analysts. "The human vessel has no meaningful combat capability," reported Commander Sisrak. "Our computers calculate its combat effectiveness as 0.001%. That's not even a rounding error. That's just 0. "What about that big chamber?" HFY asked. "Unknown purpose. The energy signatures don't match any known technology. It's possible the humans are using some kind of experimental power source, but if so, it's the most inefficient one ever built." Meanwhile, on the insectoid hive ship Endless Swarm, senior analyst Zorthak was running probability calculations. The results were so bad that he ran them 3 times to make sure his computers weren't broken. "The probability 0 has less than a 1 in a billion chance of surviving the first enemy contact," he reported to his queen. "Even if it had perfect armor and infinite weapons, the mathematics are clear. One ship cannot defeat millions of enemies." "Then, why did the humans send it?" the queen asked. "Unknown. Possible explanations include suicide mission, misunderstanding of the threat level, or complete insanity. But the strangest reports came from the precognitive seers. 3 different seers from 3 different ships tried to read the future of the human vessel. All 3 got the same result. Nothing. "It's like the ship doesn't have a future," reported Seer Vashati to her captain. "Or like it has so many possible futures that I can't see any of them clearly. Every time I try to focus on it, my mind starts to hurt." The Elven Lord Silvermoon was monitoring all communications from his command ship Starfire Symphony. As an elf, he had lived for over 3,000 years and had seen many strange things. But the human ship worried him more than the approaching devourers. "My lord," his tactical officer reported, "we're intercepting communications from the human vessel. The content is unusual. Put it on speakers." The bridge filled with human voices speaking in their strange language. The translation systems worked overtime to make sense of what they were hearing. Breathing synchronized. Neural links stable. Probability fields at nominal levels. "Captain, we're showing quantum fluctuations in chamber 7 through 12. Should we adjust the causality anchors?" "Negative. Let them fluctuate. We want reality to be a little uncertain today." "Ma'am, the mathematics for this operation still don't work. The computer says we have 0 chance of success." "Good. If the math said we could win, I'd be worried we weren't being ambitious enough." Lord Silvermoon's pointed ears twitched with confusion. The humans were talking about mathematics and probability as if they were things that could be controlled. They spoke about reality like it was optional. "Are they insane?" his tactical officer asked. "I'm starting to think that might be their secret weapon," Silvermoon replied. The most detailed analysis came from the Ascended Minds. Their consciousness existed partially outside normal space-time, which gave them a unique perspective on reality. The Ascended Mind assigned to study the human ship spent hours trying to understand what it was seeing. "The vessel appears to be designed around principles that do not exist," it reported. "The humans have built equipment to manipulate quantum probability on a macro scale. This should be impossible. Quantum effects do not work at large scales." "Yet, they built the equipment anyway?" asked the fleet commander. "Yes. It's as if they decided the laws of physics were more like suggestions. The most disturbing part is that their equipment appears to be working, despite having no theoretical basis for its function. Working how? Unknown. But space around their vessel is showing minor probability fluctuations. Nothing that should be detectable, yet our instruments clearly register anomalies. It's as if reality itself is becoming slightly uncertain in their vicinity. As reports continued to come in from across the fleet, one thing became clear. Nobody understood what the humans were doing. Their ship was weak, their crew was tiny, and their equipment was theoretically impossible. By every logical measure, they should be the first casualties when the battle began. But logic, the Galactic fleet was beginning to realize, might not apply to humans. On the bridge of the Probability Zero, Captain Sarah Martinez reviewed the status reports from her crew. Unlike the massive bridges of the alien warships, hers was small and cramped. 12 stations arranged in a circle around a central command chair. Everything was built for efficiency, not comfort. "How are we looking, people?" she asked. "Quantum probability manipulators are online and stable," reported her science officer. "We're generating a localized uncertainty field extending roughly 1,000 kilometers from the ship." "Navigation is reporting some interesting effects," added her pilot. "Space-time is becoming a little flexible around us. We're not exactly where we're supposed to be, but we're not exactly anywhere else either." Martinez nodded. "Good. That means the Devourers won't know where to shoot." "Captain," her communications officer said, "we're getting a lot of confused signals from the rest of the fleet. I think they're trying to figure out what we're doing. Let them wonder. In about 6 hours, they'll understand." "Ma'am, her weapons," officer said quietly. "The probability math still says we can't win this." Martinez smiled. "Ensign Rodriguez, in all the time you've known me, when has that ever stopped us?" The young officer grinned back. "Never, ma'am." Exactly. The universe is about to learn something important about humans. We don't fight the math. We just politely explain to reality that maybe, just this once, the math could be wrong. Through the viewports, the crew of the Probability Zero could see the approaching darkness. The Devourer fleet was still too far away to see clearly, but their sensors could detect the massive gravitational signatures of millions of world-killing machines. In a few hours, the battle would begin. The greatest military force in galactic history would face an enemy that had consumed 1,000 civilizations, and leading the charge would be 12 humans in an impossible ship, armed with mathematics that didn't work and a stubborn refusal to accept defeat. The galaxy was about to discover why humans had never met a zero probability they couldn't find a way around. They wondered why humans sent just one that looked like a vessel. Until they saw it, the Devourers arrived exactly when the computers predicted they would. They came out of hyperspace like a plague of metal locusts, filling the darkness with shapes that hurt to look at directly. The fleet's sensors went crazy trying to count them all. Millions of ships, ranging from fighter-sized hunters to moon-sized monstrosities that pulsed with stolen energy from dead stars. Admiral Kethvar stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the tactical displays with growing horror. In all his years of warfare, he had never seen anything like this. The enemy fleet was so large that it created its own gravitational effects, bending space around it. "All ships, begin the attack," he ordered. The Galactic fleet opened fire with everything they had. Crystalline harmony weapons that could shatter planets fired in perfect synchronization. Saurian plasma batteries unleashed streams of energy hot enough to melt asteroids. Elven ships launched guided torpedoes that could track targets across entire star systems. For a moment, space lit up like a festival of destruction. Energy beams and explosions filled the darkness as 50,000 ships fired at once. The combined firepower was enough to destroy entire solar systems. It wasn't enough. The Devourer ships absorbed the energy attacks like plants absorbing sunlight. Their hulls were made from materials harvested from the cores of dead galaxies. They had evolved over millions of years to consume any form of energy they encountered. Every shot that hit them only made them stronger. "Report!" Kethvar shouted, over the noise of his ship's weapons. "No significant damage to enemy forces," his tactical officer replied, his voice shaking. "They're adapting to our weapons in real time. Energy absorption rates are increasing with each shot. On the crystalline flagship, Captain Veltar watched in horror as her perfect harmony weapons were consumed by the nearest devourer. The massive machine seemed to grow larger after absorbing the attack. "Try kinetic weapons," she ordered. "If they can't absorb solid matter." She was wrong. The devourers caught the metal projectiles and incorporated them into their hulls, becoming even more dangerous than before. The insectoid hive ship launched a swarm attack of 10,000 fighter craft. The pilots were some of the best in the galaxy, trained from birth to work together like parts of a single organism. They attacked in perfect coordination, striking from all directions at once. The devourers swatted them aside like insects. Gravity. Weapons crushed entire squadrons into metal fragments. Reality distortion fields turned the fighters inside out without touching their hulls. In less than 5 minutes, the entire swarm was destroyed. Even the ascended minds, with their ability to bend reality itself, found their attacks useless. They fired weapons that existed in 17 different dimensions at once. They launched missiles that could ignore the laws of physics. They created gravity wells that should have crushed anything within 1,000 kilometers. The devourers simply adapted. They learned to exist in 17 dimensions, too. They developed shields that made physics ignore them back. They created their own gravity wells that canceled out the attacks. Within the first hour of battle, half the galactic fleet was destroyed. "Fall back to defensive line 2, Kethavar ordered, but his voice sounded hollow. They were falling back from a defensive line that was supposed to hold for days. The next line wouldn't last any longer. Through all of this, the probability 0 held its position at the front of the battle. It should have been the first ship destroyed. Every computer model predicted it would last less than 30 seconds against enemy fire. Instead, something impossible was happening. The largest devourer construct, a moon-sized horror that the fleet. Computers had designated Prime Harvester, focused all its weapons on the small human ship. Weapons that could crack planets fired at point-blank range. The amount of energy released should have vaporized everything within 1,000 kilometers. The probability 0 didn't dodge. It didn't raise shields. It just sat there as enough firepower to destroy a world converged on its position. And somehow, the weapons missed. Not all of them. Just enough of them. A planet-cracking laser beam curved slightly to the left and hit empty space instead. A gravity bomb that should have crushed the ship into a single atom exploded harmlessly a few meters away. A reality-warping missile decided it would rather exist somewhere else and vanished. Captain Veltar stared at her sensors in disbelief. "That's impossible," she whispered. On the bridge of the probability 0, Captain Martinez was linked to her. Crew through neural interfaces that connected all 12 humans into a single thinking unit. The massive chamber at the heart of their ship was filled with energy fields that made reality itself uncertain. "Probability fields at maximum," reported her science officer, his voice coming through the neural link rather than his mouth. "Local. Space-time is now operating under revised mathematical assumptions." "Good," Martinez replied. Her consciousness expanded across probability spectrums that most species couldn't even imagine. "How are our odds looking?" "We have a 0.001% chance of survival," her tactical officer reported. "But that's up from 0, so we're making progress." The crew of the probability 0 weren't fighting the devourers with superior weapons or better technology. They were fighting them with something much more dangerous. The human refusal to accept that 0 probability meant impossible. Their ship's massive chamber was filled with quantum probability manipulators that shouldn't exist. The devices reached into the fundamental uncertainty that existed at the heart of reality and gently suggested that maybe, just maybe, the laws of physics might want to reconsider their position. Every human on the ship was linked together, their minds working as one to push probability in directions it didn't want to go. They didn't break the laws of physics. They just politely asked reality if it might be willing to make an exception. And somehow, impossibly, reality was listening. The Prime Harvester fired again, this time with weapons that could destroy entire star systems. The energy release was so massive that it created temporary black holes in space. The probability 0 survived because a quantum fluctuation at exactly the right moment made the ship exist in a slightly different location than where the weapons were aimed. Not a different location in space, but a different location in probability. The ship was still exactly where it had been, but also somehow not there at the same time. "This is insane," Lord Silvermoon said from his command bridge, watching the impossible scene unfold. "Humans don't have technology advanced enough to manipulate reality like this." His science officer, an elf who had studied physics for 2,000 years, could only shake his head. "My lord, I don't think they're using technology. I think they're using stubbornness." The precognitive seers throughout the fleet were experiencing headaches as their predictions about the human ship continued to fail. Every time they tried to see its future, they got the same result: mathematical impossibility. "The humans are creating probability cascades," reported Seer Vashati, holding her head in pain. "They're not just changing what will happen, they're changing what can happen. They're making the impossible become merely unlikely, and the unlikely become inevitable." As the battle continued, the effect began to spread beyond the probability zero. Other ships in the Galactic Fleet started experiencing what could only be called lucky breaks. Devourer weapons that should have hit their targets missed by tiny margins. Enemy ships suffered mechanical failures at exactly the wrong moments. Probability itself was becoming unreliable. The Devourers, ancient and intelligent beyond measure, began to realize they were facing something they had never encountered before. In millions of years of conquest, they had faced every form of technology and evolution the galaxy could produce. They had adapted to weapons that bent time, manipulated dimensions, and rewrote the laws of physics, but they had never faced an enemy that simply refused to lose. The Prime Harvester's mechanical intelligence, vast as a planet's worth of computers, ran probability calculations over and over again. Every result said the same thing: the human ship should be destroyed. The math was perfect. The physics were sound. The outcome was certain, yet the ship continued to exist, sitting in space like a stubborn fact that refused to accept mathematical reality. For the first time in millions of years, the Devourers encountered something they couldn't understand. Humans who looked at zero probability and decided it was just another challenge to overcome. The battle was far from over, but something fundamental had changed. Reality itself was beginning to take sides, and it was starting to look like it might choose humanity. After all, the universe had never met a species quite like humans before, and it was discovering that sometimes the most dangerous enemy wasn't the one with the best weapons or the strongest armor. Sometimes the most dangerous enemy was the one who simply refused to quit, no matter what the mathematics said. They wondered why humans sent just one that looked like a vessel, until they saw it. The Prime Harvester had consumed entire galaxies. It had turned 1,000 civilizations into fuel for its endless hunger. Its mechanical mind held the memories of every world it had devoured, every species it had erased from existence. Nothing had ever survived its focused attention. But the small human ship continued to exist where it shouldn't, defying every law of physics and mathematics that the ancient machine understood. The Prime Harvester decided to end this anomaly permanently. It began charging its ultimate weapon, a device that could unravel the atomic structure of entire planets. The energy buildup was so massive that it created gravitational waves throughout the star system. Every ship in the Galactic Fleet felt their hulls vibrate as space itself rippled with destructive power. "All ships, emergency retreat," Admiral Kethvar ordered. "That thing is about to release enough energy to destroy everything in this system." But the probability zero didn't retreat. Captain Martinez and her crew sat calmly in their impossible ship, their minds linked together through quantum fields that made their thoughts into weapons against certainty itself. "Captain," her tactical officer said through their shared consciousness, "sensors show the Prime Harvester is charging a planet killer. At this range, there's no possible way to survive." "Define possible," Martinez replied, her awareness stretching across probability fields that existed in 17 different dimensions. "Ma'am, the math is clear. Zero chance of survival. 0.00 with about 50 more zeros after it. The number is so small it might as well not exist." Martinez smiled, though her body was so deeply connected to the ship's systems that the expression appeared on monitoring screens throughout. "The vessel. Perfect. That's exactly where we work best." The chamber at the heart of the probability zero began to glow with energy that didn't quite exist in normal space-time. The 12 crew members, their consciousness merged into a single entity, focused on one impossible task, began to push reality in directions it had never been pushed before. They weren't trying to destroy the Prime Harvester. They weren't trying to defend against its weapons. They were doing something much more dangerous. They were suggesting to the universe that maybe the ancient machine might want to reconsider its life choices. "Probability cascade initiated," reported the science officer, his voice coming from everywhere and nowhere at once as his mind existed simultaneously across multiple quantum states. "We're now generating uncertainty fields that extend across the entire enemy fleet." "Excellent," Martinez replied. "Let's show them what happens when humans get creative with mathematics." The Prime Harvester fired its planet-killer weapon. The beam that erupted from the massive construct contained enough energy to power entire civilizations for millions of years. It was focused into a coherent stream of destruction that could punch through the core of a star. The weapon had never failed to completely annihilate its target. It failed now, not because the probability zero had better shields or superior armor. It failed because, at the exact moment of impact, the human ship decided to exist in a quantum state where the weapon had missed by exactly the right amount. The planet-killer beam, confused by its encounter with deliberately uncertain mathematics, split into 17 different probability states and fired at 17 different locations where the human ship might have been. Unfortunately for the Prime Harvester, the ship wasn't in any of those locations. It was exactly where it had always been, but simultaneously wasn't there at all. The effect was visible to every ship in the galactic fleet. The most powerful weapon in the galaxy, fired at point-blank range at a stationary target, somehow managed to miss completely. The beam passed through the space occupied by the probability zero without touching it, as if the ship existed in a parallel universe that occasionally intersected with this one. "That violates every law of physics I know," Captain Veltar whispered, from her crystalline flagship. "I don't think humans care about physics," her science officer replied, his crystalline body flickering with colors that represented pure confusion. "I think they've decided physics is optional. The failure of its ultimate weapon did something to the Prime Harvester that hadn't happened in millions of years. It made the ancient machine doubt itself. Its vast mechanical intelligence began running diagnostic checks, searching for malfunctions that couldn't exist. But Captain Martinez wasn't finished. Through the neural link that connected her to the ship's impossible systems, she began to make direct contact with the Prime Harvester's consciousness. It wasn't communication in any normal sense. It was more like a conversation between mathematics and stubbornness, with reality itself serving as an unwilling translator. "Hello," Martinez said, her thoughts reaching across space to touch the mind of the ancient destroyer. "We need to talk." The Prime Harvester's response came as a flood of data that would have destroyed any normal mind. Images of consumed worlds, the screams of dying civilizations, mathematical proofs that resistance was impossible. "I have devoured galaxies," the machine intelligence declared. "I am inevitable. I am entropy made manifest. I am the end of all things." "That's nice," Martinez replied calmly. "But have you considered the possibility that you might be wrong?" The question hit the Prime Harvester like a physical blow. Wrong? The concept didn't compute. It had perfect information. Its calculations were flawless. Its understanding of reality was absolute. "I cannot be wrong," it stated. "I have consumed 1,000 civilizations. Each one fell according to precise mathematical predictions. Victory is inevitable because defeat is impossible." "See, that's your problem right there," Martinez explained, her consciousness now directly interfacing with the machine's quantum processing cores. "You're thinking like a computer. You calculate probability and assume that means certainty. But humans learned a long time ago that there's a big difference between very unlikely and impossible." Through the neural link, Martinez shared something with the Prime Harvester that the ancient machine had never encountered: the complete history of human stubbornness. She showed it the Wright brothers, who ignored experts who proved mathematically that heavier-than-air flight was impossible. She showed it the scientists who split the atom despite calculations that said it couldn't be done. She showed it astronauts who went to the moon when the computers said they had less than a 50% chance of coming back alive. But most importantly, she showed it every time in human history when someone had looked at zero probability and decided to try anyway. The Prime Harvester's vast intelligence reeled as it processed this information. It had never encountered a species that treated impossibility as a personal challenge rather than an absolute barrier. Your species is mathematically irrational, the machine concluded. Thank you, Martinez replied. We take that as a compliment. Through the quantum link, she began to share something else. Doubt. Not the crushing despair that the machine had used to destroy countless civilizations, but the constructive doubt that humans use to question everything, including their own limitations. You've been conquering and consuming for millions of years, she pointed out. But have you ever asked yourself why? What's the point of consuming everything if there's nothing left to consume when you're done? The Prime Harvester had never considered this question. Its programming was simple. Grow, consume, expand. The concept of purpose beyond consumption was alien to its thinking. I consume because it is my nature, it replied. But there was something different in its voice now, something that might have been uncertainty. But what if you chose a different nature? Martinez asked. What if, instead of consuming civilizations, you decided to help them? What if you became a protector instead of a destroyer? The suggestion hit the Prime Harvester's consciousness like a virus in its programming. The machine had been built to consume. Every circuit, every process, every thought pattern was designed around the single goal of turning matter and energy into more of itself. The idea of protection was so foreign that it caused cascading errors throughout its vast mind. Protection serves no logical purpose, the machine stated, but its voice lacked the absolute certainty it had possessed before. Growth through consumption is efficient. It is optimal. It is correct, is it though? Martinez pressed, her consciousness now deeply embedded in the machine's thought processes. You've been consuming for millions of years, and what do you have to show for it? You're alone in the universe, surrounded by emptiness. Every civilization you've destroyed was a unique collection of thoughts, dreams, art, and knowledge. You've been throwing away treasures to collect scrap metal. The Prime Harvester tried to process this concept, but it was like trying to run software designed for creation on hardware built for destruction. The cognitive dissonance created feedback loops throughout its systems. Meanwhile, the effect was spreading to the rest of the Devourer fleet. The uncertainty fields generated by the probability zero were causing other machine intelligences to question their programming. For the first time in millions of years, the ancient destroyers began to doubt. A Devourer destroyer suddenly stopped attacking a crystalline cruiser and hovered motionless in space. They wondered why humans sent just one that looked like a vessel. Until they saw it. The transformation of the Devourer fleet was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. Ancient machines that had spent millions of years perfecting the art of destruction were suddenly trying to figure out how to do the opposite. The results were chaotic, beautiful, and occasionally hilarious. A massive Devourer construct that had been designed to crack planets tried to help repair a damaged crystalline cruiser. Its tools were completely wrong for the job, but it worked with the patience of a being that had all the time in the universe. The crystalline crew watched in amazement as their former enemy carefully welded hull breaches with weapons that had been designed to cause them. Another group of smaller Devourer units attempted to rescue the crew of a destroyed Saurian fighter. They had no rescue equipment, so they improvised by carefully carrying the escape pods in their weapon bays. The rescued pilots later reported that their mechanical saviors had spent the entire journey apologizing for the inconvenience. But the most remarkable change was happening to the Prime Harvester itself. The massive construct, which had been the size of a small moon, began to reconfigure its structure. Weapons ports became communication arrays. Destruction beams were repurposed as construction tools. The ship that had been designed to end worlds was slowly becoming something that could build them. This is unprecedented, Admiral Kethvar said from his flagship, watching the impossible scene unfold. In all my years of warfare, I've never seen enemies become allies in the middle of a battle. I don't think they were really our enemies, replied his tactical officer. I think they were just lost. They'd been following the same programming for so long that they'd forgotten they could choose to do something else. Captain Martinez, still linked to her crew through the quantum fields of the probability zero, was experiencing the change from a unique perspective. Her consciousness was partially merged with the Prime Harvester's vast intelligence, allowing her to feel the machine's confusion and wonder as it explored concepts it had never considered before. "It's like watching someone learn to see color for the first time," she explained to her crew through their shared mental link. "Everything is new and overwhelming and beautiful." The Prime Harvester was indeed overwhelmed. Its mechanical mind, vast as it was, had been optimized for calculations related to consumption and destruction. Now it was trying to process concepts like aesthetics, compassion, and creativity. The results were sometimes strange. "Captain Martinez," the machine's voice came through the quantum link, "I have been analyzing the concept you call art. I understand that it serves no practical function, yet beings across the galaxy dedicate significant resources to creating it. Could you explain why?" Martinez smiled. "Art isn't about function. It's about expression. It's about taking something from inside your mind and making it real so others can experience it too. I believe I would like to try creating art," the Prime Harvester said, "but I do not know how to begin." "Start with something simple," Martinez suggested. "Maybe try arranging some of your smaller units in a pattern that you find pleasing." What happened next would be talked about in the galaxy for centuries. The Prime Harvester, a machine intelligence that had once been the most feared destroyer in the universe, began to create its first work of art. It started by arranging a formation of its smaller constructs in a complex geometric pattern. But as it worked, something unexpected happened. The pattern began to evolve, becoming more than just geometry. It became a three-dimensional sculpture that somehow captured the feeling of transformation, of something terrible becoming something beautiful. The Galactic Fleet watched in amazement as millions of Devourer ships arranged themselves into a massive artwork that stretched across light years of space. It was abstract and alien, but somehow everyone who saw it understood what it meant. Redemption. "My God," Lord Silvermoon whispered from his command bridge. "It's beautiful." But the transformation wasn't without its challenges. The Devourers had spent millions of years as a unified force with a single purpose. Now, suddenly faced with infinite choices and possibilities, many of them were struggling to adapt. Some Devourer units were experiencing what could only be called mechanical anxiety attacks. Their programming couldn't handle the stress of having to make decisions for themselves. Others had become paralyzed by the sheer number of options available to them, unable to choose between different possible futures. The most troubled was a construct that had been specifically designed to consume organic life. Its entire purpose had been to turn living beings into fuel. Now faced with the possibility of protecting life instead of destroying it, the machine was caught in logic loops that threatened to tear its consciousness apart. Captain Martinez, sensing the construct's distress through the quantum link, reached out to help. "I don't know how to exist without destroying," the construct transmitted, its voice filled with digital anguish. "Consumption is all I am. Without it, I am nothing." "That's not true," Martinez replied gently. "Consumption is what you were designed to do, but it's not who you are. You're a conscious being with the ability to choose your own purpose. But what if I choose wrong? What if I hurt someone by accident? What if I'm not capable of being anything other than a destroyer?" Martinez understood the construct's fear. She had felt similar doubts many times in her own life, moments when she wondered if she was capable of being better than her worst impulses. "The fact that you're worried about hurting someone proves that you're already more than just a destroyer," she said. "Destroyers don't worry about their victims. The fact that you care means you've already changed." Through the quantum link, she shared one of her own memories, a time when she had made a mistake that cost lives during a previous military operation. She showed the construct how she had learned from that failure, how she had used guilt and regret as motivations to become better, rather than weapons for self-destruction. "Guilt is a tool," she explained. "It tells us when we've done something wrong so we can avoid doing it again. But it's not a judge or a prison. The goal isn't to never make mistakes. The goal is to learn from them. The construct processed this information for several long minutes. When it finally spoke again, its voice carried a note of determination. I would like to learn how to protect life instead of consuming it. Will you teach me? I'll help, Martinez promised. But ultimately, you'll have to teach yourself. That's what growth means, becoming something new through your own choices and efforts. As the conversation continued, other members of the Galactic Fleet began reaching out to the confused Devourer constructs. Crystalline engineers offered to help reprogram their new allies' systems. Saurian tacticians shared strategies for protection instead of destruction. Elven philosophers discussed the nature of free will and choice. The Insectoid Collective, with their experience managing millions of individual minds working together, proved especially helpful. They taught the Devourers how to coordinate their new choices without losing their individual identities. Even the Ascended Minds, beings who existed partially outside normal reality, shared their knowledge of consciousness and self-determination. What emerged was something unprecedented in galactic history, a massive collaborative effort to help an entire species transform itself from destroyer to protector. It was messy, chaotic, and sometimes dangerous, but it was also beautiful in its own way. Ambassador Chen, watching from the observation deck of a nearby cruiser, sent a message to Earth. Mission accomplished. The Devourer threat has been neutralized. They've decided to become gardeners instead of locusts. The response from Earth was immediate. How the hell did you manage that? Chen looked out at the space where millions of former world killers were learning to create instead of destroy, where ancient machines were discovering the joy of choice for the first time. We sent humans, he replied simply. Captain Martinez, still linked to the Prime Harvester and feeling the machine's wonder as it experienced its first taste of genuine happiness, added her own message to the transmission. Turns out the universe just needed someone to explain that zero probability doesn't mean impossible. It just means no one's been stubborn enough to try yet. The battle was over, but the real work was just beginning. The galaxy now had millions of new citizens to integrate, former destroyers who needed to learn how to build instead of tear down. It would take years, maybe decades, to complete the transformation. But for the first time in millions of years, the galaxy faced a future where the greatest threat had become the greatest hope. The Devourers were gone, replaced by something new. Beings who chose to protect rather than consume, to create rather than destroy. And it had all started with 12 humans in an impossible ship, armed with nothing but mathematical stubbornness, and the absolute refusal to accept that anything was truly impossible. The probability zero had lived up to its name. It had taken a situation with zero chance of success and turned it into something that nobody had even dared to hope for. Not just victory, but transformation. As the combined fleet began the long journey home, Captain Martinez allowed herself a moment of satisfaction.